Boyo alert. How are we doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please come in, take a seat. Today I'm going to present somewhat of a thesis on mental health and my understanding of how you can build strategies in your mind in order to deal with many of the problems that face us. We can call them the psychological consistent patterns that I will be able to comment on quite successfully. Nonetheless, I must present a disclaimer because I am simply wearing a fur coat. I am not wearing a lab coat. So I do not know everything about this topic. I cannot tell you how physiologically some of these things might be going on. For example, you might be one of those poor people who has the curse of some physiological problem that no one else can get rid of, and there's no way I'm going to be able to convince you otherwise. So if you have that, do not think I'm telling you that it's not real and I have got all the solutions and all this. But if you want to think about it in this way, you could say to yourself, yes, it's possible to take control of a percentage of your issues. You can also do things like diet, improve the physiological nutrients going into your body. I highly recommend that. All that really basic bitch shit, like, eat healthy, get more sun, exercise and all that. I believe in that strongly. As much as I'll LARP about this stuff, I'd say about 80% of my results came from that, in terms of getting my mind straight and in order, and maybe stop doing a lot of psychedelics and stop doing debaucherous behavior like alcohol, staying up late at night and smoking weed. But there are other things which I think are weirdly central, weirdly profound in the fact that they frame all this stuff. I think this is our issue at its root, and I've talked to a few mental health professionals about this, and that we have a very singular approach to how we try to fix problems. We're like, all right, it's this drug is going to fix everything, or diet's going to fix everything, or mental mind tricks are going to fix everything. But it turns out that there's this attitude you can take, or this body of this theoretical approach that people began to take in the middle of the 20th century, which sadly has not caught on, which is known as cybernetics, or to not use jargon, the idea that we live in a system, and if you want to change the system, you can change all the different inputs. So you boyo or you boyette, you are this circle here, and what flows into this is like a lake. What flows into this is your diet, your attitude, the drugs you're taking. Coffee's a drug, and I'm out of my mind on one right now. You don't listen to me, I'm on drugs. I'm fucking out of my mind on drugs. Coffee, drugs, friends, all these, you know what I mean? All of this stuff flows in. And then one I want to talk about later that I don't think people cover enough is that your culture is a huge contribution towards this. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I am obviously everybody is very anxious nowadays. We have all the food in the world. Everybody should have everything, but we seem to have nothing. We're like King Midas. Everything turns to gold, and so we cannot experience life. Or even worse, we are putting all this gorgeous food in our mouth, but it turns to ash, and it tastes like nothing. We are drained. Our souls are lost of some sort, and we're all sick and unhappy. And you see all these graphs where it's like depression or anxiety or suicide or opioids all going up. So I'm specifically going to talk about your emotions from the old Jungian perspective. But I'm going to pretty much boyify this to the point where Jung would scream out, "You merchant of blasphemy, you've struck again." But that's the price of burning forward on a strong and certain path of your own original thought. As if this is mine, I'm just stealing Greek stuff. So I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence. Now, the first thing that I notice about emotions that people are very, and this is essentially what you're dealing with. When you're coming and saying there's something wrong with me, you're saying I have a bad feel. And the feels are bad, and I want to change them to good feels. I want to feel good. I feel bad, and I want to feel good. Some people call this happiness. We could run around in circles, throwing darts at each other about what the right jargon is. But nonetheless, it comes down to understanding that feelings are the thing we're tackling here. And so we have a serious issue, because what the fuck are feelings? Feelings are weird things. There are like often these strange, confusing signals coming out of different parts of your body that are weirdly demanding stuff. Like, think about your feelings. Like, you get that pine coming from your belly, and it's usually just like a groan, like, "Nah." And you're like, "What the fuck's up, belly?" And it's just like, "Nah." And you're like, no. I'm a reasonable, sophisticated brain up here. You know, up here in the Senate, we demand like articulate letters, and the belly just says, "Nah." And so you have to think, am I hungry? Did I eat something wrong? What's after happening? And if only it was that simple, what will happen is you might eat something bad, for example, and your belly will digest it, and you will be busy, you know, like listening to Uberboyo on YouTube, and you're like, oh, young and all this stuff, and you'll be thinking, and then suddenly you'll feel really scared about like me talking about, I don't know, like evil and all this stuff, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so terrified. But then if you pull yourself away from what's going on in this mental chatter, what's going on up in the Senate, and you pay attention, you'll be like, wait a second, I'm actually, like, my belly's upset. Like it's something I ate kind of put me in a bad mood, and that's reframing everything I'm doing. So that's a really, really strange thing. That's a very strange, because how can you necessarily trust your thoughts? How can you trust the purity of intention that you give your conscious thoughts, if you will? There seems to be something else going on. The same with something like heartbreak. You could have broken up with someone, and then you could go and you could sit down with someone and talk about life, and you can be like, look, life's bullshit. Love's just chemicals in your brain, man. It's not real, man. It's not real. And they're like, what? That's so bleak. And you're like, look, I know, trust me, I've thought about this stuff. It might be that you got an old broken heart. Or maybe it could be the truth. I don't know. But you see this in a brilliant TV series 1 called True Detective, where there's this guy who has lost his daughter, and he forms the Schopenhauerian vision of the world. And you're not sure how, like, because a lot of what he says is pretty much true, but at the same time, there's obviously a psychological trauma regarding his he lost his daughter in it, and this muddies the waters, and you don't get a clear resolution as was he lying to himself to deal with the daughter thing, or maybe the daughter thing shocked him into seeing reality. You know, like, great literature doesn't give you those type of resolutions, so you're watching this character work through this stuff, and you are that character. You're cynically trying to figure out what's going on, and you're getting all these mixed impulses coming in, and it's confusing and it's difficult. So the first thing I want to say is that we have the fallacy of perfection in our heads. We think that we are built perfect, and that everything that happens to us emotionally is exactly as it should be, and there's no sophistication or work we have to do inside of ourselves. Like when our belly goes, and we're like, all right, you're gonna read those signals, those chemicals coming up to you is exactly. You know exactly what you're going to read that as, but obviously that's not how it works. You've almost got like an institution up here that is, as I said, divided from this, and these things can get messy, and what we call the irrationality and the error inherent in nature plays into this stuff a lot. So as I said, you can get these weird, strange delusions that happen. So instead, we got to understand that we are imperfect. We evolved many of these tools that we use in order to understand ourselves, to get a feeling for what's going on, to protect ourselves from the world. And they're imperfect, and they cross-wire, and they clash, and they butt heads, and they don't do a perfect job, and they're sloppy. And we have to understand that, because understanding that is actually so fucking freeing. Like, in many senses, your bad mood might not be necessarily the truth. It could be a mistake by something that's not really your fault. It's just an accident, you know? It's not some type of evil. It's not something wrong. It could be that you've just grown up eating too much wheat. Like, you never know. Or it could be something where you just have this mindset that's kind of broken you a little bit, you know? And you can separate these things out a bit. And the reason why I would say this is because the first principle I think we have to establish is that every single feeling you have is trying to help you. And that's a really weird thing to say, because you think your feelings is evil. I have a bad mood, and my depression is like a demon that's possessing me. Are you sure? I know it can feel like that, man. I really know it can feel like that, and there is a way of seeing this that makes sense. Like, for example, you eat some ice cream, and what will happen is your bacteria in your belly will be like, I fucking love ice cream now, I love sugar, and it'll all grow. It's really weird. It's like law of attraction. You eat the ice cream, and then all the bacteria in your belly says, give me more fucking ice cream now, man. And it goes, ice cream. And you're like, oh, it said ice cream. And then you go eat more, and then the spiral gets worse and worse and worse, and suddenly you're fat and addicted to ice cream. And that's sort of demonic. It's like you're building a demon. Like it's like Satan, the impulse thing. Keep eating the ice cream. Keep eating the ice cream. But you need to turn around and say no. Like a strong religious monk, you'd be like, no more ice cream for you, Satan. You're gonna starve. I'm gonna watch you die. And Satan's like, no, give me the ice cream. And you're like, shut up, Satan. Silence, silence, silence. And then over time, Satan's like, ah, and he vanishes and he withers away like pouring water on a witch or something like that. He just withers away and he loses his power. And suddenly you don't crave ice cream anymore. And you're like, that was actually. All I have to do was wait like maybe a week or something like that, and it's pretty good, you know? It's like the same with all addictions. So there's that side of it. But then on the flip side, there has to be this understanding. So obviously, again, this stuff is complicated. It's not straightforward. And a great deal of what emotional intelligence is understanding how not straightforward it is. But these key mindsets, underneath that, there is this understanding that all of our emotions are trying to help us. Like your fear is trying to help you. Now, this, again, is nuanced. Your fear is trying to help you avoid tragedy, avoid embarrassment, pain, perhaps even death. Obviously, those. Now, like something higher in you wants to do great things like risk that will involve perhaps tragedy. Like think of a warrior. A warrior wants to beat everybody in battle, but he's going to have to risk death. Now, inside of him, there's a part of him, a really ancient part, a really animalistic and deep part of him that's wired so tightly that you'll find it literally in the spine of your brain that is afraid of that. It takes this shit very, very seriously, and it doesn't necessarily trust you. And it is good reason not to trust you, because your head is, you're an idiot, like, and you know you're an idiot. You get addicted to ice cream, like, you're that type of idiot. And so your brain's sort of, and the way you rationalize it, it's like, sure, ice cream is like, plenty of protein in it. You'll see these now, like protein ice cream. You're like, oh, but I want to get big and strong, so I'll eat a bit of protein ice cream. That'll get juicy, And your like lower animal self has been watching this for millions of years, being like, for fuck's sake, this fucking idiot, Jesus Christ, I'm like, serious, like protein ice cream. Like, is he, what the fuck? All right, we need methods to override this. And it's very, very interesting that physiologically you actually have these. You have this prefrontal cortex, a lot where this chatter comes from. And you have your heart. Your heart has more electrical power than your brain. But it doesn't really interfere until you get a big dose of adrenaline and fear. So you're there. You've probably seen this experiment online where some guy starts to tell a guy to count, and then he starts annoying him, making fun of him or something like that, and then he gets all confused because what happens is the adrenaline, the pressure you put on someone, you inject fear, you inject uncertainty, you inject chaos, confusion, shoots the energy out of the heart. The heart takes over and turns off the head. This is the fight or flight thing. So your heart, your brain, your lower body, your lower animal self has put in this like check and balance that when the head starts to overthink in times of serious crisis, it just shuts it off. And this can even work in other ways. Sometimes you'll see cats freeze in front of headlights, for example, where it's just so scary, it just doesn't do the right thing. It just triggers something instinctive that worked for whatever reason it worked in the animal kingdom, but obviously doesn't work in the era of cars. And you have all this stuff. You're an irrational animal that evolved imperfectly and you're sloppy. And this stuff is so key to understand. And so your fear is trying to help you. It's trying to stop you from dying. The cat's fear is trying to help it. It's trying to freeze it so the lion doesn't see it. But that's not adapted to modernity, to reality. Nietzsche has a very interesting phrase where he says, man is the great animal which is not adapted to its environment, the great exception. And in some sense, this is the challenge of what it means to be human. It means to be you, and probably the source of a lot of your pain. You'll often hear people give out about modernity in the industrial world, and it's like, yeah, we're not built for this. Do you think we're built for walking around with these fucking phones, like fucking our eyesight up, fucking our posture up, and not talking to humans? We're adapted to run around forests and poo in the floor, and then we're doing all this stuff where we're sitting around everywhere and pooing in chairs. Like, we are not adapted to where we are, but the fact of the matter is that we have to adapt. We have to adapt. That's essential. We have to get in key with this. And so something higher in us does this behavior. Something larger, bigger, has better vision, has better understanding. Our reason does this, but in order for our reason to be effective, we need to have it understand the complexity of the problem. Because the ego, the consciousness, the unindividuated state is to be like, all right, I understand everything, and I don't even have a body. My body is like, ugh, it's not even real. It's all irrational, stupid, idiotic, satanic, evil impulses that are trying to draw me away from what I need to do. And instead you need to have a sophisticated thing where it's like, it's trying to help me, but obviously it's not necessarily correct. So you can start to work with your instincts a lot better then. And I would say that is the key to getting into emotional intelligence. Your fear, even your depression, they have a voice. They're trying to say something. The image I use, the metaphor I use for this, and this is the great story that I present, and I am big on stories because I find people find it easier to digest. You can look up a video called How to Order Your Emotions, but specifically this one, and this is the image, is you are Zeus in the courtroom, and then in the courtroom you have all the other Greek gods, and they're each one of your emotions. You have Ares, which is your anger. You have, we'll call it hunger, which sits there and goes, ugh. And Zeus is like, what are you saying? Stop doing that. Do you have Aphrodite, which is your lust? You have Phobos, which is your fear, you know? And they're all sitting there and they're all going like, they're all like groaning at Zeus, and Zeus is like, what the fuck is going on here, bro? Like, what are you trying to say to me? And Zeus, as the king, to be a good king, Zeus can't turn around and just give them whatever they want. He can't just keep feeding hunger, because hunger will just keep going, ice cream. And you can't just run after Aphrodite. Aphrodite is not the king. Aphrodite is a member of the court, you know. Ares is not the king. Anger does not get to decide how everything works. Anger is a member in the court, contextualized. And Zeus's responsibility, that's what you consider you. Zeus has to sit up there and be like, how do I get this working? How do I run this, you know, this, I'm the CEO of this little Greek Olympian pantheon of gods. How do I run this correctly? How do I get this boardroom in order? How do I get them to obey me? And you're not going to do a good job if you say to hunger, silence, you don't exist. Or Ares, silence, you don't exist. They'll just get fucking angrier. They'll get angrier and angrier and angrier, and they'll build up. And you have to listen to them, but you have to understand that they're bad at communicating. And so you have to listen to them and say, okay, what are they trying to say? I am angry. What is my anger trying to say? And this is very interesting. Your anger has a voice. Your anger is trying to protect you. Like, all of your emotions have a message. It's just that it's not articulated in language the way you'd like it to be. But you can study it, and you can actually study it almost like an archetype. Like, I'll be able to tell you, your fear is always telling you about uncertainty. That is a guaranteed truth. When you're thinking about fear, you're literally thinking, I don't know what will happen there, and so I'm worried. And that's an incredibly freeing thing, because then you start to realize that your fear is not necessarily trying to, you know, trick you, hate you. It doesn't hate you. It's just literally like, you might have a girlfriend who's shy, very feminine, beautiful girl, but she just gets worried a bit, and she's sort of saying, okay, I'm not sure what to do about this. And then you have to be there like, all right, it's cool, I've got this, don't worry, stick by me, keep focused, we've got this and all this, and you step into it anyway. And it's your fear sort of doing that. Your fear is a companion, but it's the part of you that witnessed the horrors of life that you in your little bubble have never experienced before, such as like murder, death, killing things, fighting and all this stuff, and it knows that shit's real. This is older than you, it's smarter than you, and it knows. Phobos is like, don't ignore me, you fucking plonker, this shit is serious. And you're like, okay, I know, but I've got this, don't worry. And then in some sense you need to prove to Phobos that you got this. Like, you need to prove to your girl. You can't just be like, don't worry, I've got everything, girl, and then you walk out and get like crushed by, I don't know, the big bear or something like that. Maybe you gotta go kill a few bears, and then she'll be like, you got this. And maybe she'll calm down a bit. She'll feel a lot more safe around you. And it's these type of things that you got to start thinking, that this stuff is a little bit riddleish. It's a little bit difficult. But there is a logos, an order, a conception of this that makes sense, you know? So you're in this courtroom, you're listening to all these, and all of these has a message. Fear is that uncertainty thing. Ares has that demand for high. Like, Ares is a beautiful one. Your anger is trying to protect you. Your anger is demanding higher standards. Your frustration, as horrible as that emotion is, your frustration is demanding higher standards. Your frustration believes that you deserve better. It's actually a great emotion. This is why people often say apathy is lower than anger. Anger is not the most sophisticated emotion, but Christ, Lord, it's trying to give you power. It's trying to say you need to stand up for yourself, you know. And if you ignore anger, it's weird. If you ignore anger, he kind of morphs. This is the way the Greeks work. They're brilliant at stuff like this. You ignore anger, you're like, shut up, Aries, shut up, Aries. And Aries, you know, doesn't get to go to the gym. You chain him up and he can't go to the gym anymore, so he atrophies. But his energy still comes there, and then he comes back and he's transformed now into resentment. And that's a far more intense version of anger. It's anger that's been poisoned by not being allowed to free itself. And so now it's reached a level of hate that is dark and difficult and scary. And it would have been a lot smarter for you to deal with it earlier. But now this is what you've got. So you've got to deal this as well. And your resentment is telling you, okay, there's something wrong. Someone's not letting me express my desire for higher standards. Now that's a very interesting thing. First you desired, I want better. I believe I'm worth better. And that's Aries saying, rawr. I want more, rawr. And then you ignore him. And so he morphs. Now he's in resentment. Now this is different. You're saying someone in here is stopping me from releasing Aries. And so I've turned into this. And that's interesting because now your hate won't be necessarily demanding higher standards. Your hate is demanding something first. It's like destroy the obstacle so that I can release Aries. And that's where where Nietzsche says the greatest evil, I guess you could say, or the most cruel stuff you can see in history is from the hateful, from the resentful. And that is often the people who are incapable of expressing their anger, because that's when it festers into something that is incomprehensible in its magnitude. The stuff they want to see is horrible, you know. And so I think this is a key thing to get your mind in, is that this is what you're working with. You're working with something that is messy. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about suicide. And I know my tone is completely wrong about this. Forgive me. I get excited when I'm doing these talks. I find them enjoyable. But I understand that people face some very, very intense... I've been through these thoughts before. You face these very, very intense moments in your life where you say to yourself, is it really worth it? Should I keep fighting on, you know? And you could imagine you're Zeus in the courtroom and you're fighting this big war, which is what life is. And then it's really, really hard. And then one day you're sitting there and then some guy dressed all in black comes in. You're like, who the fuck is this dude? And he comes up to Zeus and everybody suddenly goes quiet. Like hunger, instead of going, bleh, turns around and go, woo. Woo. And this guy, he walks up the courtroom like a scene in Lord of the Rings, dressed all in black, very, very somber. And, well, maybe we could call him pessimism or cynicism. And he says to Zeus, so you're fighting these wars. You're fighting for all this stuff. You know, you keep fighting. As you can see, everybody's suffering. It's causing a lot of pain. You haven't won. You're probably not going to win. Even if you did, it's not like that's the end of it. Then someone else will get resentful. Someone else will get angry. The Persians will come. And the fight will just keep going on. And it's just this endless cycle of suffering. It's just going to keep hurting, you know. And it's not like we're going to win anyway. We're a mess. We're not going to get this shit together. And think about your dad, Kronos, who put this stuff together. He was so incompetent. He was so late. He was eating his own kids, you know. You're starting from that. There's no chance you're going to win. And look, there's something in you. I guess this is you, Zeus, is that you desire... there's something in you that believes that you have to, at all costs, keep fighting. And the one thing that's wrong is to stop fighting, is to give up, you know? And are you sure that's true? Maybe that's the ultimate delusion. We already said that all these instincts, they're sloppy and unnuanced. Maybe Maybe the desire to keep fighting, the will to survive, is just a trick that your instincts play on you, and they keep you in pain. And maybe it'd be worth freeing yourself from that, because it's too hard. And people, you're so scared of death, but how would it be any different than sleep? You're fighting this whole war to stop the whining, the moaning, the suffering. All these people, all their demands, that's where your suffering's coming from. Your hunger is oh, I need more. Aries is angry because he can't get what he wants. But every time you give him something, he just gets angry about something else. And you're trying to become happy. You're trying to get peace. You're trying to get peace. You're trying to get it all to end. So it's just a relaxed evening forever. And there's never any more challenges. And you can have that. You just got to take a little drink, an opioid, a sedative, and put you to sleep forever, and you never feel anything bad ever again. Yeah? And you'll reason, it's oh, no. Just be honest with yourself. Everything you do, you're trying to avoid pain, suffering. That's what it's all about. There's one solution that is guaranteed. And Zeus is oh, fuck. Because Zeus is a difficult problem there, because at this point, the courtroom kind of gets it. Kind of makes sense. It's just too hard. It's too much work. So, the question you ask yourself is, I'm in this hell. I'm in this suffering. And I'm trying to get to heaven. But it's weird. I keep saying to myself that it's possible that I could fall into hell if I do the wrong thing. But I'm already in hell. And maybe the whole escape is to end life. Maybe life was the mistake. Or my life at least. And so that's a difficult issue. And the way I've thought about that, and the way I understand that, is that you're facing a great choice based on your conception of suffering. I think this is somewhat philosophical. Suffering is what all the religions say is our greatest issue. So you can see this guy all dressed in black saying this to Zeus. Zeus is got to get his philosopher on at this point. Suffering is the great issue. Why do we suffer? Buddha asked that question. How do I end suffering? Christ was showing you how to bear suffering correctly. Greco-Roman showing you that excellence will bring you catharsis from suffering. How do we suffer nobly? What do we do about suffering? Schopenhauer, reading Buddha and Christianity, would suggest if you want to end suffering, you destroy the will to live. As they say in True Detective, we walk hand in hand to extinction, man. Spiritual suicide. And suicide might not reach this level of intellect that I'm coming at. It can sometimes just be a phenomenally huge pain. But I think when you confront suffering, and this is what we're talking about, the confrontation with suffering, it's the root of all these problems, I find. When you confront suffering, the pain of the world, and the metaphor I'm going to use is that there's this mountain in front of you, which is your life. And, we all wish that we were on top of the mountain just cycling down, and it was all easy till the end, and then it was this you sink into a lake and you don't even realize you're going to sleep forever or something like that. But life turns out a lot more like you begin at the bottom of the mountain and you're looking up and it's like Everest, and you're wearing a pair of shorts and you're like, oh fuck, this is going to be tough, man. And it's cold, and you're not Irish, so you're like cold as nasty, And so you're looking up on top of this mountain, and you can't even, there's clouds, so you can't even see what the fuck you're struggling towards. But there's something in you, could be a demon, that's saying to you, run up the mountain. As we said, hunger pushes you for ice cream. How can you trust it, But you do it anyway, because it's a very, very strong demon. It screams, And you start climbing up the mountain, and then you get 10 steps, and they've all been steps that are about this high each. And you kind of sit down and you're like, well, fuck this. Why? Why am I doing this? Why? What is this all about? What is the purpose of this? Why am I struggling? And Zeus is getting confronted with this question. Why? Why are you doing it? For what reason? And if you don't have a good enough reason, you're going to have a problem, because what's coming up is, and this is a very interesting emotion as well, there's this emotion, I guess you could call it shame. I think it is shame, but it's one of the most prominent ones because it sits on our identity. Like, who are you? Right? And then you have this, perhaps Zeus gets this mirror brought up in front of him. Perhaps this is what I'm kind of making this up as I'm going. The guy dressed in black, he pulls out a mirror and he shows Zeus, this is what you are. And you're trying to take on the whole world. Look how pathetic and horrible you are. Look how imperfect you are. You think that you were made by God. Look, like, your emotions don't even make sense to you. Your belly groans at you. But look at you. You're pathetic. You're useless. You're not good enough. And that shame hits you because you have to look at going up that mountain and you're saying to yourself, oh fuck, I'm not good enough to do this. And this is a hard emotion to deal with because in some sense we aren't. Like, humans are not perfect. And so we're not capable of doing everything. We're not good enough to conquer the world, you know? We're destined to fail in some sense. Like, we will set out on endeavors and we will fail and we will have to accept I was not good enough to do that. And like, we see characters like Alexander the Great and they go take over the whole world. They climb all the way up to the top of the mountain and even they fail eventually. Like, he wasn't able to consolidate his empire, for example. And it fell apart. And essentially, all of his children got killed, I believe. So it essentially rendered him, he left no real impact in the world apart from this story in history. And you can see that it's like we are deeply flawed. And our competence is deeply overrated. Perhaps deeply underrated as well. But we have that imprint on our identity. We're not good enough. You're faced with suffering, and then you hit that challenge. Am I good enough to reach the top? And I think the more ancient religions are giving you a model for understanding, yes, they celebrate the people who reach the top, most certainly at the expense of the people who fail. Something like Christianity shows you it's okay to not be good enough. And there's great power in that. Buddha is almost like saying, why climb the fucking mountain? He just stops halfway along the mountain and meditates. He says, if you want to find peace, here you'll find it. And it is this sort of conquest of these wills. It's like a radical challenge of these questions. But fundamentally, what I'm trying to describe is that that's the challenge that you're getting faced with. Why do I suffer? And I feel like I'm not good enough to keep going. I feel like I'm not good enough to beat suffering. And that's because it comes down to a goal question. You're suffering, you're struggling up this mountain, and you need to have a very clear, the thing that will bring you up the mountain is an understanding of why you're doing it. And this is why people are so vulnerable to any type of religion, ideology, quest, crusade. Once you sort of feed hunger and you feed Ares, and that's usually what keeps you engaged with the game, as Buddha said, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to regulate hunger, Ares, and all this. We'll get these emotions in check, and we'll free people from them. And then they'll reach this sort of place where they can think about this stuff. And they'll say, I kind of got a bit obsessed with being a king and all that. Maybe I'll just accept my lot and make peace with it. There's not, like you want to be happy. If you want to be happy, just maybe stop trying so hard to climb the mountain. Like, is it really all it's cracked up to be? And that's one solution. And people find solace in that. They find solace in just the peace of the moment and all this. And really humbling themselves and reducing their goals. And as I said, now this is very complex stuff, because as I said, we're imperfect. In my artistic video, I was very much like goal, but a huge power towards me becoming a better artist was actually me accepting less and humbling myself and admitting I'm not good enough. And that allowed me to become a way better. And I felt I got the quality of my work went way up. And so I got closer to my goal through the inverse. It's weird how this stuff works. But in a more basic sense, you're confronted with this mountain and the arduous climb up it. So you say to yourself, why am I doing this? And you need to have a vision up there on top. And you might have a vision and you might reach a vision, get a house, get a family, get all my food sorted, get my money sorted. And you realize you climb up to that one, climb through the clouds, and you climb to that peak and you're standing on top of it and you look up and then there's just this huge utter mountain. It's bigger. It just keeps going. And you're like, fuck. It just keeps going. It keeps going. And so you have this challenge, and this is a religious level challenge. Why? What is the big goal? What is the big story? Some people who especially are very, very lucid thinkers get very, very caught up in the big stories and, for example, miss stuff like house, family and all that. Marx is an example. Very much was like, why? What's this big thing? And this is why people get attached to this, is because they have this craving, this need to understand why they suffer and why they live. And reasons give a catharsis. This would be Nietzsche's first principle. Any reason is better than no reason. Thus, we will accept delusion, no problem whatsoever. And you'll see this in people. This is where cognitive dissonance will come in. People are like, what is cognitive dissonance? Your brain realizes that if you have doubt, you're more likely to die. The people who had more doubt were more likely to die. So we've built this kind of tunnel vision that once we believe there's something up there in the clouds on top of the mountain that we can't see, we'll just accept it, and we'll cognitive dissonance and just keep going towards that thing, and we'll just keep climbing. And someone will come along and be like, what if this isn't top of the mountain, or what if that mountain's the wrong mountain? You'll be like, I literally don't care, because I'm just the will to survive is pushing me up it, you know. So this is a very, very important thing, because you are led by your vision. And if I'm to talk, obviously there's physiological sides to this and all this stuff. If I'm to talk about getting your mentality in order, and this is like, you know, there are people at the bottom who are depressed and anxious and all this. This is for winners as well. And I think the goal obviously is to take yourself from that lowered downward state and spin yourself into the glorious state of chasing up and success and action and all this. But both of these require vision, and the vision is the core thing on top. And it's something that will save you more than you can understand. It's very, very trivial. You only have to sort of see it as shadows, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but that can be enough to lift people out of this apathy and this downward spiral of cynicism. And when you're confronted with suicide and those really difficult questions, I find that's what saves you, is a belief that this is worth trying, and then somehow that gives you the understanding that I can at least fail trying. That's something that came to me when I was like, you know, I'm not suicidal. I never thought about it that much, but it would confront me during difficult times. And I think it comes to everybody. It's part of the human experience. And this is perhaps something we need to talk about more. But I would say to myself, oh, it's so hard. I can't keep going. But then I would understand that if I was to take my life and give up now, at least I should go out guns blaring. Like the Fight Club quote, if I'm willing to lose everything right now, why aren't I willing to lose everything to go for a goal? I may as well try. I may as well go out with fireworks, that type of thing. And that's a fascinating thought, because the one demon, the black robed demon that you're not supposed to entertain, that Zeus is supposed to be like, expel, is the ultimate form of freedom. And perhaps this is what these religions that we call slave moralities actually give us in a very, very profound way. They give us freedom from the consequences of the game. It's the ultimate warrior's freedom, where it's like, I'm not even afraid of death anymore, because I know that I could take my life and that would be it, and I do it because it's too hard, and because I know I'm willing to do that. Because I know, and this is sort of like the suicidal thing, because I know that that's an option, and I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to let this go. I'm not that attached to this whole game. I can also go all in on the dream, because I have nothing to lose anymore. Madness is has a taste of freedom when you think about it. And that's a big boy thought, because that's a thought I believe warriors must go through, because the ancient attitude was great death was also always the most noble way of going. And the way we'd understand that, for example, Leonidas with 300, our understanding of like him dying, you're just like, oh, that's terrible, he died for no reason. But if you think about it, he could have ran back home and tried to protect his family and all that, and had this ugly, unnoble death where they kind of stomped in and murdered him, and then he had to watch his wife get raped and his children get killed and all that. Or he could go out and he could set a highly firm, hardcore stance where he's like, you will literally have to destroy me here. And I'm willing to die. I have nothing to lose. Because if I don't stand up here, I don't even care if I fucking lose. If I don't stand up here, it's not going to get any better from here. Fatalism, cynicism. These are actually very negative, pessimistic thoughts. And this is what Nietzsche would call strong pessimism. They're actually a form of freedom. So people are always like, be careful of pessimism, nihilism, and all this, and suicide. Maybe they're trying to help you in a way. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Maybe the guy all dressed in black is just trying to give you the bleak reality. Death's coming anyway. And it's your job to interpret it properly, and that's tough. Oh, he's trying to say that I have nothing to lose. He's trying to say that I'm being a coward. I'm trying to live in this kind of comfort zone. And I'm on the mountain and I'm trying to make it a nice journey up. Maybe I should go all fucking out and die jogging up the mountain from exhaustion. There's a good way of committing suicide. How about I do it that way? And so, I have terrible news about a awful Boyo report where we were in an observance helicopter analysing the majesty of the mountain archetype. And didn't we look down only to see littered, nude bodies of boyos who had sprinted up the mountain until they died of exhaustion. And of course we have to go down and we have to mark all these juicy boyos as heroes. And we know that they're now in heaven. And I need to explain to you the architecture of heaven, because heaven works in a very specific way. You have doggy heaven, which I'm sure you've heard of before. And that's actually like right beside boyo heaven. That's where they all exist in unison and they all interact forever. So in order to make this less trite, because it's one of those, it's like the mountain archetype level bombshell to say that like people need a purpose when they're struggling with nihilism, depression and all that. And so when this like guy comes up in black robes and Zeus will pull out his like self-help book and be like, oh, all I need is a purpose, like everybody in the courtroom will sort of look around and be like, all right bro, okay, what the fuck, what does that even mean? Dare I say, is that jargon? Could be at this point. So in order to have an original take on this, I'm going to take a model that Nietzsche used called the Apollyon versus the Dionysian model. Now I'm going to put a slightly different spin on it, or maybe a slightly more psychological spin on it. Nietzsche uses it in the context of art. Now obviously the life that we live and the world that we live in and the reality that we live in is fractalized to an extent. So what we could use to describe the great grand theories of art can also be mapped onto the very, very small things such as the individual. Nietzsche talks about Apollo as the ability to like form statues, architecture, visual behaviors and all that, and get this like clear crystal vision of art, whereas Dionysus is like dance, music, the more emotional felt parts of art, the lower parts of art, the more lower experience of life, swing your hips and all that stuff, going with rhythm. Now what's brilliant about this is because our nervous system is somewhat mapped to this. Like, the lower parts of us are down low. It's no coincidence. That's our Dionysian part. That's also our love-making part. And that's, of course, the most Dionysian part of us all. And then up on top, you have the brain. The brain is a very unfelt thing. Like if you're stuck in your head, you're very much visual. You see things, but the brain is also the highest, the position of the highest sense we have, which is vision. The entire back of our brain is designated towards vision, whereas the lower senses, such as feeling, such as smell, such as taste, these are less powerful compared to vision. Vision we dedicate a lot of resources and energy to. And so these two are almost like the fullest dichotomy, the fullest difference within the human. You've got the vision, the clarity, seeing, the brain conquests over instinct and feeling in order to go for the higher goal, go up to the top of the mountain. And that would be what people talk about, where it's like, visualize your goal and your purpose, man, and all this stuff. And then lower down you have that felt thing, which is Dionysius, and might in fact be the depression that you're suffering, the anxiety that you're suffering. You could register this as the experience of not having that vision. So these things go in concert. You have Apollo up there, and you live in the nihilistic age, and there's no vision, there's no goal, there's no purpose, there's no place. We're the middle children of history, and as a result, your Dionysus, the root of your tree of life, goes sour. And perhaps these two things work in a very strange unison, whereas if one goes sour, the other goes sour. So like I said, it's sort of cybernetic. It's like a tree of life where you have to kind of get both of them firing on all cylinders at all times. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because, yes, it's good to say, okay, you need revision, and everyone's like, oh, well, I haven't heard that before. Jesus, that's all I needed to hear. Sweet, right, well, let me go sit there in the corner and do a bit of, visualizing, do a bit of visualizing and get it all in order. It's kind of crap. Like there's definitely something to it, all right? So it's important to do stuff like that, boyo. But I'm gonna try take it another level, because most people don't know what they want. That's what I hear. You're like, oh, you need vision. It's like, I don't know what I want. What should be on top of the mountain? You're like, get a vision. They're like, okay, right. Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read a lot of Nietzsche, read a lot of Jung, read a lot of books. I'm going to strategize out, like they go all Apollo. I'm going to strategize out. I'm going to build this perfect vision and just consider it up there. This is exactly how things are going to work. That's what I was doing. This is exactly how my success is going to work. And it's going to save me this way. The vision will save me, not the work. The vision will save me. Not a single step on the mountain. Instead, I'll get the vision perfect, and then it'll like reach down with its hand and lift me up. And obviously you can see the danger in that. And that's especially coming from people who don't know what they want, as I said. And I think a lot of us are in this place. Like, in some sense, I don't know what I want, but I'm still able to move forward. Interesting. Because I guess our mistake and the danger of Apollo is that it's got this finality to it. This is the perfection of reason. Reason wants things to work out in a perfect circle. But there's almost, I guess, the guy dressed all in black. His secret... The secret freedom that he gives you is he says nothing will be perfect until you die. And so the only way you can get finality is by living towards that death. Now, he might say something like suicide, but you can flip that into one of the most, what Nietzsche would call a strong pessimism, to say, there is no certainty until the fat lady sings. And so I may as well go all out and burn myself out like a comet, like flying and all that stuff. A comet like burning out and then exploding at the end. That type of idea. Finality, perfection is something reserved for eternity outside of time. You live in a prison of time, and so you must engage in some sense. So the question then becomes, how does one engage? And this actually comes back to understanding the dichotomy here. You're trying to get the vision, and there's part of that, but the one that I think people are way worse at, because we as a culture live in the whole stuck in your head age, the whole over intellectualized age, the whole we're very Apollyon, all right, and we lack the Dionysian. And what we need to do in order to get in touch, this would be Jung's idea of you have superior and inferior functions, so you have a thinking, which is close to what I'm talking about here with Apollo, but Apollo is more sexy to say, and then you have feeling, which is Dionysus, because Dionysus is just more colorful to say, as I said. And your instincts and your feelings, though they are lower, though they are not as they cannot see far, they cannot give you that clarity of vision, that perfection of knowing what's going on, and thinking and the higher orders of the brain. Feeling has an intelligence that is far deeper and could be more reliable than a lot of what goes on up here. Now, that's a very important thing, because you, as the ego, actually are stuck up here. You're stuck up here, and you are trapped in this bubble of one, this echo chamber of one. But you're able to actually get outside your own head, inside your own body, or inside your own psyche, which is such a weird idea, by listening to something that is not this chatter going on up in your head, where your Apollyon thing is like, what is my purpose? I don't have a purpose. It's almost like if these two things are connected in your nervous system, your feelings have a voice, and the voice appears as what's talking in your head. But maybe you would be better going down and addressing the feelings directly, seeing them like the courtroom, like the gods down here. And instead of just listening to what they're writing and thinking it's yourself, maybe you could go down and experience them a bit. So you go into your Dionysus and you ask yourself, like Zeus, you're like, well, what value is there in these emotions, these desires? What the hunger, like Zeus looks at hunger over there in the corner with his big belly with all the cake, and he's like, duh. He's like, all right, listen here, boyo, like I'm not too sure there's much value coming out of this fat fuck over here in the corner. And he looks at Ares, and Ares is just like banging his head off a wall in rage, and his nose is like broken, and Zeus is like, Jesus, is this what I've got to work with, lads? Okay, I don't know about this guy on YouTube now at all, like what he's talking about. But you can look at it this way, and I've touched on this earlier. All your instincts and emotions are not evil. They're also not perfect, but they do want the best for you. Now that's such a huge reframe. And that's such a huge reframe because what I mean by they want the best from you is they actually have pretty high standards, and they want you to raise your standards. They're looking for you to bring things up a level. As I said, your anger is frustrated and angry because it feels like it's, at the bottom of dominance hierarchy. It feels like it's boundaries, it's personal space, it's not being respected. You get angry when someone insults you, and that's because people are offending the dignity of yourself, and your anger goes, and you can, if you take some of this religious stuff too seriously, or you get it wrong in your head, you will become angry, and then part of you will be like, dissipate the anger and allow myself to melt into the anger and let it go. And this is the nuance of this stuff. There's wisdom to that. Maybe you shouldn't react to everything, but at the same time, when someone pisses you off, you should most certainly pay attention to what this screaming Aries is saying, is that this fucking person's crossing a line, and you need to stand up for yourself. And why would that matter? Because this instinct was built into you through millions of years of evolution. Animals get angry because when something crosses a boundary, personal space, threat, disrespect, attitude, it's a serious problem. A serious problem. Even in this little hierarchy of wolves or chickens or whatever the fuck, or lobsters or whatever, these boundaries matter. This could be the difference between 1,000 years as a slave or a king if it came down to one fight or something like that. And I know the magnitude of that is hard to comprehend, but you think about how the European monarchies were established. It was a set of wars during the Dark Ages that set up the 1,000 years before all the monarchies fell in the last century. This stuff has serious consequences for where you're positioned and all this stuff. And so your anger is saying to you, you need to get yourself in a position, you need to fight for your place in the world, you need to hold boundaries and all that. And look, there's wisdom in being able to let go, but there's also danger, because if you let go, that could be, if you don't do it right, that could be a sort of acceptance of slavery. So again, this stuff is complicated, but my original point is that Aries has a message that is actually looking out for you. He wants to help you. The same with your hunger. And if you don't work with Aries or your hunger properly, they'll be blunt, useless. Actually, they'll be working against you. But it's on you to reason with them and be like, all right, listen, Aries, I know you want higher standards. I know people are disrespecting me. I know people are ignoring me. People are treating me low status. People are not valuing my words. I know, I understand, okay? And you're really pissed off about this, and you want to just punch people, and you want to just scream. But let's listen to those Buddhists a little bit. How about what we're going to do? What I'm going to say to you. And this is Zeus speaking now. This is the Apollyon reason speaking now. The higher version of yourself speaking. You're not being an idiot. You're not saying, shut up, Aries, and trying to suppress it. What you're saying is, okay, I understand you're trying to help me. This is what we're going to do. You're going to tell me what you want, and then I'm going to set up a long-term plan. And what you're going to do is you're not going to freak out. What we're going to do is we're going to discipline you to channel that anger over the course of a long term. And so Aries is furious, but then he kind of sits around and he's like, fuck, Zeus, yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think you're right. And if he's a bit cranky and he still gives out, what you can do is you can bully him for a while by doing stuff like meditation, calm him down, show him that you're the actual boss, bully him, and then say, look, now that I've broken you, beat Ares. Now that I've broken you, let's get this done. Let's get what you want, because I'm here to serve you. I'm trying to get this courtroom in order. You turn around to hunger just the same. Listen, bro, look, I know you want cake. We all want cake around here. Cake's good shit, man. Like, it's good shit. But let's think about what you're really asking for. Because you're an interesting dude, and this is where it becomes important. Understand that each of these gods, each of these drives, each of these instincts have their own personality that you have to get to know to a large extent. And you say to your hunger, oh, okay, what's the crack? What's going on here? Yeah, I understand. Yeah, you want cake, you want and all that stuff. All right, but you're asking for something else. You're asking for nourishment, in a kind of base level. In fact, you're asking for satiety, feeling good, feeling full, feeling satisfied, aren't you? Isn't that what you really want? And hunger might be, no, what? And you'll say, well, you're looking for satiety, health, nourishment. Taste is obviously a good thing, but it's interesting. I've learned from working with you that if I put you on a strict diet of clean food, you'll actually develop a taste where you enjoy that. And for example, me personally, I stopped eating sugar for like years ago. And now when I have something very, very sweet, it's actually not that nice. It hurts. Like, it hurts my teeth. It's too strong, And back before, I would have relished that stuff. And so now I learned that hunger kind of adapts to what is more benevolent for it. And so you can develop this taste where you like good stuff. And so it's like, all right, listen, dude. So you're quite you're quite inconsistent and all this. Maybe we could manage something where we have this sort of discipline that actually feeds you really good stuff that you enjoy, that keeps you satisfied. So you don't have to like make everything about cake. Maybe you can make it more about steak, for example. And then maybe we could go to the gym, because I've noticed that when we're hitting the gym a lot, and when we get Ares to take his punishment out in a boxing bag, I notice that our mood gets regulated, our stomach gets regulated, our diet gets regulated, our cravings get regulated a lot better. And hunger might be, sounds all right, dude. And again, he might be cranky. You might have to spank him into submission, but you set up that long-term plan. Same with lust. Same with fear. It's all the same thing. What does lust want? Well, lust wants fertile beauty. Lust wants you to have that most treasured experience of life, which is like sex, and it wants that for you, and that's a good thing. That's probably one of the greatest triumphs of life, the pure affirmation of the success and power and the dignity and the right for you to extend your legacy on into the future. Your conquest over the struggle of reality and the ever-looming problem of entropy and death. This is your perfect conquest of it. This is life's perfect solution, and you get to do it. And that's what your lust wants. And it might get it might go a bit crazy where you like stop going to work and you just do Tinder all day and all that. Maybe you got to say the same thing. Maybe you say, all right, we're going to try Catholic chastity for a while, just to put you in fucking order. And then maybe we can talk about how we can express this in a more intelligent way. Turn around to your fear. Your fear is the same thing. Your fear is like, dude, I just want safety. I don't want to worry. I see the future. Your fear is actually really smart. Thanks. So your fear is trying to help you. I see danger. I see possible problems. I'm very ancient. I know I'm much smarter than your mind. I know you're very good at maths and talking shit on the internet and all this, but I have this ability to, like, this is what I'm not like an institution. I'm an organ. Fear is. I'm like designed to focus in on uncertainty and danger. And so wherever it pops up, I just zone in on it, because when I was in the jungle and you weren't in the jungle, your brain was not in the jungle. I was in the jungle. I've been with animals. I'm this old. I'm a god. I'm way older than you. When I was there, this was so important. When I got a hunch, and I'm very good with hunches and intuitions and all this stuff. When I got a hunch that there was a snake in those wriggling grasses, my mind would, like, the mind would easily say, blah, 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 it's probably nothing, and then get fucking bitten and die. So I've learned that I need to focus on this stuff and make you focus on this stuff. And you, in order for me to shut up, you need to relax me and all that. And so Zeus would be like, all right, cool. Okay, cool. So you want certainty, you want stability, you want order, you want things, where you need to, You need stability and platforms. You're looking out for me. And what happens when you do this is you realize that all these feelings, these Dionysian expressions, actually have secret, hidden standards that are pushing you towards the best version of yourself. Someone who's sexually satisfied, someone who is nourished and healthy, someone who has standards, has the ability to speak what they believe in, has boundaries, has masculine assertions of what their space and reality is, and has many uncertain problems covered, such as financial stability, or I will talk about this in a second, perhaps various other dangers which they are now able to face, such as violence and stuff like that. And this is what you see then, what Zeus sees when Zeus does this properly, and he sees the nuances and complexity of dealing with instincts. He talks to all of them and he's like, holy fuck, how do I put all these things together? Because I see that they're all trying to help me, and they're all trying to point towards something ideal. Like, there's something smart in Dionysus. The instincts are not just irredeemably dumb. They are pointing towards a better version of myself, almost like this hero, this ideal. If I had boundaries, if I had my discipline to regulate my food, if I had the money to keep all this stuff in order, if I had the charisma and the beauty and the health to get beautiful girls and all this, I would be a very juicy boyo, wouldn't I? I would be quite the juicy boyo. I would really have a lot of stuff in order, and people, well, that'd be a good person to be. And then it becomes this ideal. And Zeus, Apollyon in his style, listens to all of them, and then he crafts it out, and this becomes the image of the hero, the son of Zeus. This is who he wants to be. He's like, all right, here's how we satisfy all of this stuff. And this is sort of a vision. This is a purpose. This is where all of this stuff comes together and starts to make sense. And this is how we are thinking very, very smart about what emotions are, because we're showing that they have intelligence, but the intelligence has to be pulled out of them. And this is how we can start to see stuff like, we could sit down there and visualize the reality we want to live in. And there's definitely something to that. But there's also another channel we could go to where we could listen to, all right, what's the basic first steps and what are they pointing towards? And so you might get a bit obsessed with being a hero, like, Tony Robbins or Conor McGregor, or, fucking Napoleon or something like that. And this is a very abstract, far off hero that's someone worth admiring, a good person to visualize, but they're very separate to who you are. Your mountain, your position on the mountain is very specific. And if you want to start taking steps forward and you want to get in touch with your purpose, perhaps clarity is what you need. And the most clear and sincere and personal thing you're ever going to have is your feelings, your Dionysius. So you should go down and listen to them, and they will show you your first steps. Not some abstract theory about who you got to copy or imitate. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but at some point you got to break free and do it yourself. You got to sit down and be like, all right, what are my first steps? And you go and you sit with your emotions and you listen to them all. And I'm literally telling you an exercise that you should do. What are my emotions? Blah, 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 blah. Draw them out as gods. I'm making this colorful because people won't do it otherwise. And people will then write to me being like, oh, I have problems and all this stuff. It's like, fucking do this then. This will solve your problems. You are able to solve your problems. You have this capacity. How do you think illiterate people dealt with shit like this? They didn't have all the information to feed Apollo. What they had was themselves and their minds. And they did stuff like this in their own crude and different way. And so here you go, try this. And if you want the ultimate exercise in order to try this, probably the best thing to trust is your fear. Your fear is probably your deepest and your most ancient and your most powerful. Because the Jordan Peterson model, you're in a place of order, man, and there's chaos out there. Chaos is uncertainty. Fear, I guarantee, if you listen to fear is looking for one thing: uncertainty. Where am I uncertain? Where am I insecure? That's what is the root of anxiety: uncertainty, insecurity. And look, something like an anxiety disorder can be fed by many things. A bad diet could be one, for example. That's completely irrelevant to this stuff. But this is very, very controllable, as a diet is. But this is very, very controllable in the sense that you can sit down and you can just ask yourself, what are 5 things I'm afraid of? And then I actually guarantee, when I did this, I was like, oh, fuck, I'm afraid of real violence. I'm afraid of being myself and speaking the truth. I'm afraid of performing publicly I'm afraid of talking to beautiful girls. I'm afraid of financial insecurity, the future. I'm afraid of not having any money in a year or over the next couple of months. And I'm there like reading fucking Zarathustra and all that, being like, how do I save the Western world, man? How do I become the Ubermensch? How do I do all this? How do I do all these, big things, these glorious things? I'm pretty sure I'll be Napoleon by next year. Like, how do I just kind of put myself in order for that? Me. I needed to do the most basic things ever. All I had to do was take a step forward in each of these directions. And I honestly, it was a project for 2 years. It kept me busy for 2 years. I went and I learned to fight, and I did some sparring, and I got into the experience that I was afraid of, which was standing there with someone trying to hurt me. And then I sparred, and then I sparred against a professional boxer. And after that, I was sort of like, wow, that was shit. I got hurt really bad. But at the same time, I kind of came out of it, and I was like, fuck, like I'm not a lump of sugar. And my confidence went way up from doing all these things in unison. I tried to speak more sincerely about my reality. I was often afraid of embarrassing myself or saying something that would piss people off and all that. And over time, I gently just nudged myself step by step forward to assert disagreeably what I believed a bit more, and that became a very, very useful tool. And that's like, there's a lot of relaxation, because then you just stop caring what other people think after a while. Like you begin to get those reframes, and that just baby stepped me a bit forward in that direction. 1% better. And public speaking, I went out and performed. I performed in front of 50, 100 people. Eventually, I built it up to that. And then beautiful girls, I went to talk to beautiful girls. That was always enjoyable. Money, I sat down, and this was a discipline thing. I was like, all right, this is a long-term thing where I have to get this shit in order. I have to suck it up. I was there like, I'll just become like an artist next year and make like thousands of dollars and all this stuff. And then I'm there having all these like neurotic understandings of what it means to be an artist. And instead I was like, just get a fucking boring shitty job that just holds things stably in place. And once I did that, my ability to be creative just went through the roof. Serious power. And then once I had achieved all this stuff, I was, as I said, I did these 5 things, and I became a better version of myself. I was actually a step up the mountain, and I was like, that's interesting stuff. That's fucking interesting. And the person I became was not something I could have visualized beforehand, because it was actually too simple. It was too basic. And then what was interesting is I could sit down and I could do the whole exercise all over again, and it still worked. Suddenly you'd imagine, I faced all my fears, man. I've integrated the shadow, I did it there like last month. Like, it's over now. And so I did it again. And what happens is I did some sparring, and then I asked myself, and I'm actually still on this stage, I asked myself, what would it be like to get in a real fight? Like, we're talking public, in a ring with a ref. People watching. Like in sparring, someone will punch you, but they'll ease off instead of, hurting you. But there, the consequences are final. What about same thing with speaking my mind? Like, how far should I push that? Like, I've noticed that the truth is not something that necessarily gets you friends. Let's put it that way. So how far am I supposed to go? Scary stuff. And even now, thinking about this stuff, I'm like, whoa, that's a bit scary, bro. Yeah, there's scary stuff here. The performing 50, 100 people, that's all right. Nothing on 1,000. How much different would 1,000 be? Very interesting. Same with the financial thing. I'm secure for like a year. What about 10? Same with girls. It's like, I can talk to beautiful girls. What about really beautiful girls? What about really beautiful high status girls? These type of things. What about high status powerful men? What about that as well? What about people who are different than me? What about these type of things? Like, you can keep pushing this stuff, and then the ideal gets higher, because the person you'd have to be to go 1% higher is actually quite juicy. And then this model, Zeus, stands and he listens to all these instincts, and perhaps he's paying particular attention to fear. And he's modeling, and he's crafting, he's sculpting, and he's getting the hero. And the Apollyon vision of the hero is beginning to form. But he does this through the Dionysian. And what I'm trying to say is that you can imagine, like, you have to have an instinct that a faith that there is something on top of that mountain. All right, you're not going to be able to draw it out perfectly because you can't see above the clouds. You just have to be like, all right, there's something up there. And if you want to take a step forward, because this is what people struggle with the most, if you want to take a step forward, actually go down to your Dionysian feelings, map out your 5 fears, and just take a baby step in each of those directions. And I guarantee you'll be 1,000 steps further than you could ever get. Maybe that was a bad metaphor. The momentum you'll get from that will be so much greater than anything you could have achieved through sitting there and overthinking this stuff. So what's interesting about this courtroom, and that if you actually do the due diligence to listen to the old instincts roaring and bring out what we could say is their unconscious desire, their unconscious ideal, what they're looking for, and if you can distill it out of them, you actually kind of shape something that is unified in an identity. A better version of yourself, as they say in all the self-help communities and all this. Now, this is fascinating because this implies that built into your nervous system is something you're unconscious of, which is a higher version and purpose of yourself. It is this deeply unknown to yourself, imprinted DNA level conception of better, bigger, better, juicier, faster, stronger version of you. And it's there. Jung, people really don't get what Jung was talking about when he addressed Nietzsche's conception of the Ubermensch. Jung said perhaps we have to discover it, and people, like, very obviously very black and white because people are just incompetent generally, were like, all right, so what Jung means is that the Ubermensch is invalid and Nietzsche is invalid because he was mean. Fucking A1 there, you know. Let me stamp that right there in that essay. Jung could have been suggesting something along the lines of what we're talking about here, which is interesting, is that if you go in, perhaps if you like try Apollinarly intellectualize and create what you want, you might run the risk of being too stuck in your head and going a bit out of your way and making a mistake in some sense. And so there's something dangerous we need to be aware of about that. Not that there's lack of value in that, but if you can balance that with the inferior function, which is the nervous system, the feeling, the Dionysus, you will begin to see that there's an intelligence in here that also has the model of higher hero and glory and all that. And perhaps if you're looking for an Ubermensch, we need to take a look at that side of things as well. And I actually think Nietzsche covered that. Nietzsche was very much wrestling with these two conceptions of Apollo versus Dionysus and throughout his life, and trying to understand, like, eventually he came to see both of them as incredibly value, and it leaned a little bit more on Apollo's side, surprisingly, despite people always calling him Dionysus. So it's a very interesting idea there. And like very profound in its depths, because as I said, you face those 5 fears and you move up a level and you become more juicy. And we just don't know how high that juiciness could go. It could go all the way to heaven for all we know. And perhaps heroes, when we see great people, what our nervous system is reacting to. You know, Conor McGregor got very popular in Ireland, you know, had money, confident, speak out well, could deal with fighting, very good in conflict situations, very socially able. Our nervous systems are like ideal. There he is. There's something heroic and perfect, and we attach to that in a very, very powerful and beautiful way. And so we know this on a deep, deep level. Now, what I want to talk about here is something incredibly serious and difficult, and I am by no means an expert in this. I just want to touch on this because this is something we need to understand. When we go out and face those fears and go out into the chaos and the uncertainty and all that, and we come in contact with the danger of the world, we will come into contact with evil. We will come into contact with things outside that bubble which we call life and order, which are dangerous and scary and frightening, and burst us out of our understanding of what it meant to be a human and what it meant to be good and all that stuff. For example, you might be a juicy warrior, you might do this 5 fear thing and be like, oh, I'm scared of real violence, and you go and join the army. And then you come from a nice, calm Western society, and then you go out into a war zone and, you know, you kill some poor innocent person in their house, or you watch one of your friends get blown up by an improvised explosive device, and you see how indifferent nature is to the suffering of man. And that's a very, it's just a statement by me. It's just language by me. But when you feel that, when you're in the presence of this stuff and you're scared for your life during every moment, so your nervous system's paying heavy attention and ascribing a lot of meaning to what's happening, this can destroy you because you get traumatized, you get touched by evil. Like that black figure came in and said there's no point fighting because the whole game is rigged. The gazelles get swallowed by the lions. This game is evil. Whoever made this game is some type of fucking demiurge, and the best thing for you to do is bow out of this game, bro. Climb up the mountain. Man, you don't even have a fucking clue what that entails. It's a sick place, this place is. And the only reason you're engaged with it is because your instincts are evil and they're trying to suck you into the game. And then you go out and you ignore them, and you go out and you follow your instincts, and then you come in contact with murder, death, and the intensity of what's going on there. And you come back, like perhaps if you're a woman, a tragedy could happen, such as something like rape, and then you experience the brutality and evil of the world in that sense. Or you're a man, you come back from war, and both of them will have post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's like I was talking to check out Invictus on YouTube, a German genius. He talks about how when something like that happens, your nervous system literally freezes in a weird way. So your nervous system is like stuck in a moment in time. And if a girl got raped and the guy grabbed her from behind, if you like reach over and tip her on the shoulder, she might start freaking out because her nervous system is frozen in that moment. And so that area is very, very sensitive to that. Same with post-traumatic stress disorder. Some guy goes through a shelling in World War I, and he comes back to London afterwards, and he's just a bit fucked, but no one notices anything too much. He's just a little bit on edge all the time. He gets on the train, and suddenly it goes over a bump. It's like, and he's suddenly back in the trench, and there's bombs landing all over him, and he panics and he freaks out because he's frozen. He's stuck there. It's a very, very hard thing, and I'm not saying I know how to solve this. This is some of the most difficult things a human can ever go through. But in terms of a religious question, like I said, at all points when we hit the suicidal questions, these deep depressive questions, these really existential questions, we find ourselves on the bottom of the mountain. We find the mountain to be evil, difficult. It's unclear what reward we are getting, but we must sit down and ask ourselves, we must get our mind in order. We must redeem ourselves. We must find that son of Zeus, that glorious hero, that belief that if we kept on facing all these basic Dionysian emotions like our fears, we take a step forward. And if we keep going up, that will pull us to something that is glorious, good, and better than the hell that this world is. This is improving the world. This is in some sense redeeming the world. And look, I'm using like essentially all Greek mythology to this, but if you're a Christian, that's Jesus right there. That's that energy, that idea of the perfect hero. Like that's what that is. And it's if you're like anti-Christian or you're just not Christian, it's the same thing. You can use Greek myth, you can use some type of atheist thing, like you could use perhaps the Ubermensch or something like that. I don't give a fuck what you use. All I give a fuck is that you succeed. That's all that really matters here. And it's this type of thing. You have that energy shining, that possibility, that hope, that faith, that capability. Most importantly, you're at the bottom and you're stuck, you're frozen in your uncertainty and your fear, and you don't have good emotional intelligence skills or whatever. And I'm teaching you how you can change that and give yourself power. But most importantly, you're trying to just do one thing. This is what it all comes down to. One thing. You got to flip yourself from I can't to I can. From I'm not good enough to climb that mountain to I am good enough to climb that mountain. And that hinges on there is a reason to climb that mountain. And that hinges on good and evil based on, is the world a good place worth fighting for? And can it be redeemed by me? Which it can, as I've said. You just need to follow your emotions instead of getting too caught up in your Apollyon stuff. Because Apollo, vision, clarity, thinking is weak to evil and the darkness. This is what happens to people like Schopenhauer when they meditate and contemplate the brutality of nature. And they kind of get stuck in that frame and they're like, this game is evil. There's no doubt about it. And Nietzsche tries to free you from that and say, this game is harsh, no doubt about it. But if you can be sincere, honest, and find the strong, pessimistic warrior in your soul and just keep moving forward. And like this is what you have to say. Certainty is for cowards. You want everything to be perfect and certain. You're trying to feed that brain of yours. Certainty is for cowards. You have to climb without knowing for sure that everything's going to work out. That's all your solace you'll ever had. Embrace the chaos. Embrace the uncertainty. That's what a man does. That is the definition of what a man does. It's not like what you look like, how strong you are and all that. It's none of that stuff. It comes down fundamentally to the danger and facing it with courage, integrity, and as based and truthful as you can. As the Romans used to say, you could not become a vir, a man, unless you embraced veritas. And so this is fundamentally what the drivers you're going to have, and I would suggest this is the redemptive power of these archetypes and all this stuff. You can save yourself from these really sinking down difficult positions when, like even basic stuff like going through a breakup, when you're like, oh, what just happened to me? You can work through this stuff and find a way to spin it into a positive thing and go back up. And I'd imagine that must be universal on some level. And so no matter what level of trauma you've had, you're probably going to have to face a pattern similar to this. The gravitas of what you're facing could vary vastly. That's the only thing I'll say about that. And again, I'm not super competent or understand completely what goes on with deep post-traumatic stress, but that's my take on that briefly. Now, lastly, the reason why these redemptions, I wonder, this is not even a hypothesis, I just wonder that we seem pretty bad at doing this. Were we better in the past when we had a very coherent spiritual worldview? Like, for example, I wonder when Joshua genocided the people of the Levant for Yahweh, for the Israelites, in order to establish Israel. I wonder when he did that, did the people have a clear conscience because their religion had Yahweh giving them permission to do that? So it was completely morally justified in their souls. And so they didn't get PTSD afterwards, being like, oh, what have I done? Am I evil? Because that's actually what you hear a lot from the soldiers. It's like, am I evil? And if I am evil, does that mean all of humanity is evil? Does that mean that the world is evil? There's no point redeeming these fuckers. They're all evil. And so did the Israelites do that? And because Yahweh was like, it's yeah, do it. These fuckers, the Canaanites that live here, they're bad. You have to kill them. They're monsters. And did they do that with a clear conscience? And then it makes you wonder, is that, do we struggle with extreme stresses and trauma and all that? As I said before, your pain is one thing, your suffering seems to be another. It seems to be more to do with what meaning you ascribe to the signals which we call pain. That's a very crazy idea. And so, because we live in this spiritually vacant Schopenhauerian world where nothing means anything and that we don't believe in anything, does that leave us more vulnerable to suffering? And is that a cultural problem? When some soldier goes out and kills people and watches his friends die, is a big part of his trauma asking himself, why did that happen? What was the purpose? And the cultural narratives, such as like bringing democracy to the Middle East, or saving these people, or fighting for whatever, it just doesn't work, because it's not imaginative enough. It's not good enough. It's not hardcore enough. Like the difference between that, bringing civilization to these people, versus fucking God, Yahweh saying, yeah, I'm God, do what I say. And they're like, well, not gonna argue with you, brother. Like, this is what we have to kind of think about. Is this what goes on? Is this how this stuff works? And so I wonder that, are we in a position where, Apollo, Schopenhauer and all this, the pessimism has sunk into the cultural tree of life. So if we had the nervous system is the tree of life, and we had the personal tree of life, Apollo, the vision at the top, Dionysus, the feeling at the bottom, has our cultural tree of life lost the death of God and all that? It's gone blank. And so now we have the Dionysius, the Dionysius feeling. This is why we see the massive opioid crisis, the depression and all this, and people are very bad with emotional intelligence because they do not have a mythology in order to help them deal with it. You could even argue perhaps Christianity was a bit crude with this, but it still supplied people with a framework. Christianity was like, generally all your feelings are Satan. Your fear is just simply Satan. Ignore it. And that might be, it's not as sophisticated as I'd like it to be, but it worked to an extent. It's more of a crude way of dealing with the problem. But then with where we live in, there's no framework to understand it at all. They just are, and all people really can do is just obey them. and then kind of struggle confused and listen to self-help about it. But do we lack imagination about how we address this stuff? Are we failing to update something? And so there's a very big question, because you know as well as I do, there's something up culturally. People are in a bit of a rough spot. And so the last thing I'll say, and this is just going to be a bit of a cliffhanger, is that you could take a scale, because I believe I'm speaking about a mathematics of psychology here. You could speak about this tree of life that I said, where you have that, you need that purpose, that vision on top, and what you need to do is you can't just over intellectualize this. What you need to do is you need to take these baby steps with your Dionysian feelings, and you'll see that these feelings actually have ideals that they're trying to model for you, and you'll move towards that stuff. You'll slowly baby step up the mountain. So that's there. So that's true. That seems to be true. And if that works for you on a personal level, and I almost guaranteed it will, and do that, no matter what happens, do that, would it work for us on a cultural level? Could we look at our woes, our jadedness, and say, oh, everybody's getting divorced, everybody hates the 1% in whatever way they categorize them, everybody's getting divided and polarized and into like ideologies and all this, everybody's, the youth are just absolutely gutted and broke and all this, and everybody, there's a lot of discontent floating up and all this, and then we could ask about our fears. What do we fear about? Oh, we fear about, like, what are our fears? We fear about killing all the animals, destroying the environment. We fear about destroying the West. We fear about destroying our heritage. We fear about oppressing the minorities and all this. We have this blend of things all going together, and these things are all fighting against each other. And perhaps we could look at this stuff the same way as we looked at those other fears, realize that the courtroom is just way bigger this time, a lot more complicated, a lot more collective, but understand that it's possible to look at all this stuff and deduct that there could be paths forward from this. And if we were intelligent enough and sophisticated enough, instead of just bitching like fucking idiots all the time, which we're definitely going to continue doing, this video probably ain't going to make much of a difference, because people have a nature, and that nature is a difficult thing to work with. But nonetheless, could we, or maybe we get like a select few people who do this properly, and what they will do is they can start to deduce through these feelings steps forward, and that would sort of vaguely indicate some type of Apollonian vision and purpose, dare I say solution. I don't know, but I will talk about stuff like this later. I'd say the next couple of videos might be more about collective stuff, if you will. But this was my wacky guide on anxiety, depression, and all that crack. I hope you enjoyed it. I guess there's not much more to say. Just go fucking do the exercise. That's all I'd say. Oh yes, consultations bios. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking a difficult, if I don't say so myself, I'm taking something that's very, very difficult. People struggle with that, and me, of course, I'm just able to just like whip it into shape. But I am taking something somewhat complicated, which is the emotional experience of mankind, and I'm trying to communicate it. Now, I could go up here and I could slap you with terms and jargon. Like I've read, as I said, even though this fur coat is on, I've read many lab coat studies and all this. And like if, for example, look up pain science, a very, very interesting field of knowledge that is actually the support for a lot of what I'm saying. I just don't mention it too much. And I could sit up here and I could throw studies at you and blah, 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 and technical terms and all this stuff. And I've always found the people who do that, it's valuable, it's useful, but there's two things wrong with it. First of all, it misses the big picture, and it doesn't communicate well. And they're probably related in some sense, because what people are generally looking for are big stories, big pictures, big frames, big perspectives, narratives that they can fall into and be like, oh, this is the narrative, and this is why this narrative is consistent and all that. And so what I would do with this is I would be like, how can I make this colorful? How can I make people see this? How can I make people understand this? And this would be what I call good storytelling, if I don't say so myself. I would see this as the correct way to communicate. And it's literally a technical thing. It's about an attitude you take towards how you speak and how you present your information. Because as I said, a lot of people can get stuck up in their head. This is our age. I guess this is sort of human nature. But what you need to do in order to improve your ability to reach people and to get people to pay attention to what you're saying, and of course get people to value what you're saying and thus value you and value your opinion, and so that you can, you're in your head and you're like, I want to save the world and all this, or I want to do good things, or I want to make money, or I want to get attention, or like simply I just want validation. I just want validation, man. In order to do that, you need to understand how to reach people's minds, and it is a question of psychology. Everything I'm building this stuff on is that our brains are designed for dreams. Our brains are designed for visual things that we can experience with our senses. And the most sophisticated way to communicate is by taking complex stuff and digesting it down into really sophisticated abstractions that come out as images. And that's why people like Jordan Peterson would say narratives and myths are like super philosophical statements that we cannot just dismiss as fairy tales. These things are so much smarter than most of the jargon you read in books and whatnot. That comes down to you being able to storytell, being able to use this different style of thinking, being able to take all that stuff that's inside your head that's been echoing around your head, and there's definitely some value there, and converting it into a way of communicating that is engaging and useful and whatnot. So this is what I'm going to offer you if you're interested in working with me and doing that. I will leave a link in the description, a link in the comments, and pop down there. Go through that portal of the link and I'll be on the other end and we'll suss out what we should do. Thank you very much for your time, and I will talk to you later, people. Bye bye.